it is sort of Brenda from Bristol on sort of turbocharge, oh no, not another one. How many elections is Clacton going to end up having?
It is Wednesday, the 12th of August. Tomorrow, Thursday, the 13th of August, residents of Clacton will be asked for the sixth time in the last 12 years to head to the ballot box and to cast a vote for their local MP to represent them in Parliament. We'll just take a look at that ahead of that election tomorrow. And joining me to do so is Luke Tryl, the director of the pollsters More in Common. A very good morning to you, Luke.
Good morning.
The man with all the numbers. What are the numbers telling you at this moment in time, on the eve of the election? How's it looking?
Well, it's fair to say that constituency polling in Clacton has been quite sparse. The one constituency poll that there has been was from Survation, which suggested that Nigel Farage was on course to get somewhere between sort of 2/3 and 70% of the vote in that by-election, with Count Binface getting around a fifth of the vote there. But that is only one poll. Constituency polling is quite difficult. We've spent quite a lot of time in Clacton talking to residents in focus groups. I think it's fair to say that for lots of the residents, Nigel Farage has certainly lots of fans in the seat. He's got other people who are less keen, but I think the overwhelming feeling is a bit of why are we having this by-election? Why is this actually happening? And I think Nigel Farage's greatest opponent on Thursday may well end up being Turnout rather than any of the other candidates. And that's the number that I'll be looking at most closely. How close does Nigel Farage come to, or even does he manage to exceed, the number of raw votes, the number of people who voted for him in 2024? Does he manage to get to that number or surpass it? Or is enthusiasm so low, it's the summer holidays, that actually he falls a bit behind that despite winning against his other opponents comfortably?
Do you know what? It's really interesting, actually, that you mentioned, this is a by-election like no other that we've really seen. And about you're mentioning a lack of polling that's been done. And I don't know if you can do polling on gallows humour, but there is part of this by-election that I wonder if we can't underestimate the British public's desire and love of gallows humour and the support that Count Binface or any of the other strange named, whether that's the Monster Raving Loony Party. Can we underestimate that? Can we poll on gallows humour and what people might actually do on the day for a laugh?
Well, look, I think we've talked, there's a lot of literature on things like a shy Tory vote or maybe even a shy Reform vote. Whether there's a shy Binface vote, I do not know. And it's difficult to pull that out in polling. We'll find out in the early hours of Friday morning. But I think when you speak to people, so if you assume there's broadly sort of three camps, there's a sizable camp in Clacton for whom, they like Nigel Farage, they like what he stands for. And then there are two other smaller camps who sort of say, we don't really like Nigel Farage. One of those camps says, we might as well, vote for Binface. It sends a message. It's quite funny. I should say there's another group, though, who say, we don't like the fact that our only opponent, our only choice other than Nigel Farage, or the most high-profile choice, there are obviously other choices, is Count Binface. It makes us a bit of a laughingstock, and they wish that the other parties had stood as well. I should also say, from talking to people in Clacton, that most people are aware that this might not be the end of the story, that if Nigel Farage wins, there is a chance they could be back at the polls again at some point over the next year if the Standards Committee reopens his inquiry and finds that Nigel Farage did do something wrong. And there's it is sort of Brenda from Bristol on sort of turbocharge, oh no, not another one. How many elections is Clacton going to end up having?
Yeah, and I think that point that you've just made there, Luke, about people not wanting to be seen as a laughingstock by having their MP in Parliament be Count Binface is actually quite a pertinent one to consider that I hadn't really thought about in that sense before. And I wonder, we've got this, we've got the overview of this at the moment. Of course, like you said, I appreciate, very difficult to do polling on by-elections, and we don't know what will happen on the day. But is there a fatigue when you're talking to people? Is there a weariness? Is there any apathy? Or perhaps from some of Reform supporters in Clacton, is there a sense that they too believe that this is a political stunt, which is something the other political parties have said? Do they think they're being played here? Is that any kind of a sense amongst voters?
Oh, no, there's very definitely some of the people we've spoken to think that this is a stunt. They think that it's unnecessary. They don't really understand why it's happening. As I say, there are others who say, well, look, Nigel Farage wanted to come to Clacton and show that we're still behind him and still backing him. But I think it's fair to say that in general, having spoken to people, enthusiasm for this by-election is not very high. If I contrast it with time we spent in Makerfield, time we spent in Gorton and Denton, there was much more, I think, of a sort of, buzz around those by-elections, as much as there's ever a buzz around politics. But this one, I think, a little bit less, a bit like, that sort of question of why. And I don't think Nigel Farage has been able to answer that question, even though, as I say, he still has significant support in the seat. OK, and just very quickly before we go, are we still seeing a Burnham bounce more widely across the country, or is it just a short-lived bubble as the realities of governing start to kick in? Well, in our voting intention which is out today, Labour are up 2 points, so they're keeping their lead. That's a bit narrower than when he started. I should say Burnham's personal approvals are much higher. He's on plus 14 in our approval rating. And so it seems that he is getting a lot of credit, but the bounce for the Labour Party isn't yet as big. And I think that's the big question. Can he transfer some of that brand Burnham to the Labour Party as a whole? And we won't know that, I think, for a couple of months. OK. Well, we'll sit and wait and see what happens in Clacton tomorrow. Luke, thank you for your time. I never forget that we are a nation that voted Boaty McBoatface for the name of the boat.
Also, there was a monkey, a mascot vote. Monkey mascot voted the mayor of Hartlepool as well. So these things do happen.